Hi, Year 9. We are beginning our first unit of Year 9. Very exciting, I know. But your first chapter kind of brings together a little bit of what you guys were working on the last several years, which is integers, decimals, fractions, ratios, and rates. We only have to worry about integers right now. That's going to be our very first topic. So what we're looking at the moment is just integer operations. So all the things that we do with integers. And that word operations just means our addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And honestly, you guys do a lot of this on your calculator already. So right now, throughout this first section, we're just double checking that we know the basic rules so we can make sure our calculator always supports us the best it can, because our calculator is only as smart as we tell it to be. What I do want you guys to do though before we start is make sure you always put a header on your paper. So if you haven't already written down the number and the letter of the section and the title of the section, you can write it down exactly as I have it written. You should also always have the date written on your paper, because you might need to go back and think, all right, what do we do on this day so I can prepare for the test or prepare for a quiz, or you might just remember something better by the day that you did it on. So always put down the date. And then I have these gray bars drawn just to separate the title. And then on the top, and then the bar down, the vertical bar down the middle separates basically our keywords or our questions on the left, and we're going to put all of our work on the right. So if you'd like to set your paper up the same way, that would be very helpful. Feel free, guys, to pause the video at any time as well. Right now, you guys are looking at the word integer, and that is our biggest and most important word for the very beginning of this chapter. We need to recognize that an integer is any positive or negative whole number. So that means when you look at this number line, 0 is in the middle, and you're basically counting all positive numbers to the right, all negative numbers to the left, but only whole numbers. So no decimals, no fractions, no partial numbers, just whole numbers. And we're really only talking about addition, and we'll talk about multiplication as well. But addition, the reason why I have and subtracting in brackets is because when you add, and then you think about subtracting, subtraction is really just adding a negative number. So let's say I want to subtract 5. I could also say I just want to add negative 5. So that's why adding really encompasses addition and subtraction. When you guys are given questions, every single time that you are adding integers, you're thinking about where do I start, and then what direction do I go? So if I started at positive 10, if you guys come over here on this number line, positive 10 is right there. If I start at positive 10 and I go plus 8, that plus tells me that I need to go to the right. So if I start at positive 10 and I count 8 more to the right, I'm going to wind up at 18. Again, if I start at negative 10, so if I start way over here, the negative end of this number line, and I go positive 8 again, so I'm going to go right 8, I'm going to wind up at negative 2. Okay? So if you'd like to pause here, go ahead and pause and try to see if you guys can come up with the rest without your calculator. I know that you can always double check yourself with your calculator, but try the last 3 just without your calculator. So see if you guys match up with the same answers I got. And I waited for the last one because if you guys notice, there's something that looks a little different here, and I know you've seen it before. But when you just have one sign, like this 13 is a negative 13, so I'm going to start at negative 13, but then I have minus negative 5. If I have 2 negatives next to each other, they negate each other. They cancel each other out. Just like if you say not in real English when you're speaking with your friends. If I say not, I really mean yes, it's actually going to happen, right? So I'm going to turn both of these negatives, when they are next to each other, into positive. So what I'm really saying is negative 13 plus 5, so I'm going to go right. And when I do that, I will end up at negative 8. The second idea for today is multiplying. And again, I have dividing in brackets because when you divide, you are actually multiplying by a fraction. And we'll talk more about that as we go into solving equations later this year, okay? But you want to be thinking about multiplication and division going together, and it's because dividing is really multiplying by a fraction, okay? Again, we are only doing this with integers right now, so we're not worrying about decimals or partial numbers. So let's take a look at what we have here. I'm going to identify what my question tells me. I'm starting with a negative, and I'm multiplying by another negative. If I have the same two symbols, so negative times a negative, or in the second example, I have a positive times a positive. If that happens, again, we just said two negatives negate each other. They cancel each other out. So I'm going to end my answer with a positive. I'm going to write POS period for positive just to remind myself that I know my answer has to be positive. So if the calculator says negative for that first question, that means I typed something in the calculator wrong. All right? I need to make sure I'm thinking when I use my calculator. Second one, positive times a positive also will end up as a positive answer. Okay, so when the signs are the same, they always wind up being positive. So let's look at a few examples where that's going to happen. Go ahead and pause here. See if you guys can put your answers down for these first couple. For the third example, I have -5 in brackets and it's squared. That is the same as saying -5 times itself. Now, I put brackets when I wrote this out because it's kind of sloppy to write two symbols next to each other. So I had a multiplication symbol and I had that subtraction symbol right next to each other. So if I put the brackets in there, it helps me separate and it makes it look a little bit neater. So we're using those brackets for a reason, and we don't want to have two symbols next to each other without those brackets there, okay? So I have a -5 times a -5. So again, two negatives. I'm going to identify that again. Negative times another negative. I'm going to wind up with a positive answer, and I should get 25. So the same thing's going to go for division. If I have a negative number, and now I divide by another negative, what do you guys think your answer is going to come out to? Okay, we already know we're going to wind up with a positive. So now I just have to worry about what's 45 divided into 3 sections so that I can get my answer of 15. I don't want to get hung up on the positives and negatives because I know my answer is going to come out positive in that case. Okay? The last example is when we start to string operations together and we have to use our order of operations. So if you guys notice the brackets, I have brackets on the -8, but it just has a -8. It has one number on the inside, so I don't really have to do anything with -8. But the second set of brackets, I actually have two numbers, so I actually can do that operation, 5 minus 12, and I can simplify it, okay? So there are two ways that I could attack this problem. I could do it by hand, or I could do it with my calculator. So what I'd like you guys to do is go get your calculator if you don't have it. Pause now, go get your calculator. Once you have your calculator, put it in exactly as it is shown on the screen. So I want you guys to actually type in 9 times, open the brackets. You guys have brackets on your calculator. I will show you tomorrow if you can't find them. Put in -8, close the brackets, plus, open the brackets, 5 minus 12, and then close the brackets and push enter. Once you guys push enter, that is like your equal sign, and it will tell you exactly what you should get for this problem. If you started to do this one by hand, you would notice that you'd have to do the 9 times the -8 first. Oh, excuse me. You can do that first, that's fine. You can do the 5 minus 12. Both of those are separated by that plus sign. So if I did I'm going to wind up having -72 for the 9 times -8, and I'm going to wind up with -7 for the 5 minus 12. And when I put those two together, when you guys push enter, you should get -79. Okay, so please double check that you can get that same answer, even check all of them. You can get the same answers with your calculator just as you can without. So last but not least, I'm going to ask you guys to really think a little bit here, because this is actually where your brains are going to be coming in and using some of those skills that we just were talking about and revising. When you have a question like what's given here, we have -5, which again, I'm going to identify as a negative number. And I multiply it by something, but I do not know what that something is yet. And I'm going to get a negative number as an answer. We know, if you guys look back at the last screen, we know that when we have two negatives, you end up with a positive as an answer. So what's going to happen now, if I have a negative and I want to get a negative as an answer, I definitely can't have a negative in this spot right here, right? Because two negatives would make a positive. So what I'm going to wind up having to do is multiply by a positive number in order to keep the negative so that they don't cancel each other out, okay? So if that number has to be positive, well, 5 times what makes 35? Then I can just think of, all right, I got that 7. 7 times 5 makes 35. So I know that -5 times positive 7 is going to make negative 35 because I have one negative and I have one positive. Okay? So I want you guys to think about this last one and tell me what you think the next time that I see you in class. If you start with a positive, you divide by something, then you divide another positive, but you have to get a negative number as an answer. How in the world am I going to do that if I want to get a negative number as an answer? All right? So when you guys are finished with that last one, just go back over your notes. Revision is key, okay? Always remember that before you guys come to class, look at these 3 items here. Complete any problems that we didn't already finish in class, okay? See if you need to go back and try any others. Maybe choose a couple questions to do again, all right? There's a lot of recommendation and research out there that says the more you do even the same question, it kind of goes in your brain one more time, and then you're more confident with it. And then the last one, see if you guys can mark your notes at all. So I walked you through some of the basics of this lesson. See if there's anything that you can star if it's important, or check it if you say, I totally get it, or maybe there's a red question mark, I really don't get this, I need to ask Ms. Ensign tomorrow. Or maybe circle an item if you think it's really, really important, okay? And I will meet you guys in class next time.